Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone.
Authorities in Louisiana's St. Landry Parish say that a young mother is facing charges this week after she allegedly left her child unattended on a major road late at night, then attempted to falsely report the situation as a kidnapping to cover up what had really happened. The whole thing began at around 1 a.m. on November 5th when police in the city of Eunice received a call from 24-year-old Artasia Viges. Viges stated that she had been in the middle of changing a flat tire near U.S. Route 190 and Industrial Road when her young son had been abducted. She claimed several people had pulled up in an older model truck and had taken off with the boy. When officers came out to investigate, they were relieved to learn that the boy had been located. He had been found by members of the public in the parking lot of a local medical clinic and had some abrasions to his knees but was otherwise unharmed. The thing was, though, the boy had a very different explanation for what had happened that night. He told officers his mom, quote, ran him over and left him at the side of the road. Based on this pretty significant contradiction, authorities questioned the boy and Viges further. That's when the 24-year-old apparently revealed the truth. Viges explained that her son had never been kidnapped. Instead, she had lost him. They had been arguing in the car and things had gotten so heated that she pulled over. She said that when this happened, her son jumped out of the car before it came to a stop, which is how he'd been injured. Still, she said she didn't try to go after him and instead let him run off into the night until she eventually lost sight of him. After that, she had driven away and made the call about the kidnapping. Following this admission, Viges was arrested. She is now charged with cruelty to juveniles, child desertion, and false swearing for purpose of violating public health of safety.
If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, then you might remember that a few weeks ago we brought you a pretty insane story out of Monroe County, Tennessee. It was here where a wanted fugitive allegedly killed one man, stole the ID of another, and made a fraudulent 911 call about a bear attack, all as part of a convoluted plan to avoid jail and fake his own death. The whole thing started on October 18th when police received a 911 call from a man claiming to be a distressed hiker. The man identified himself as Brandon Andrade and said that he had just been seriously injured after falling off a cliff while being chased by a bear. After locating the coordinates of the cell phone call, authorities went into a wooded area in the small town of Tellico Plains. There, they found a man lying at the bottom of a cliff. He was dead and had clearly suffered a number of injuries. A search of the man's body revealed an ID card matching the name the caller had given them, Brandon Andrade. However, it wasn't long before things took a strange turn. For starters, the injuries this man suffered were not consistent with either a bear attack or a fall from a significant height. Even more concerningly, though, this was not the body of Brandon Andrade. However, Brandon's ID had been stolen and used on multiple occasions before that 911 call. Upon further investigation, police were allegedly able to link an Alabama man named Nicholas Wayne Hamlet to the crime. Hamlet was known for being incredibly dangerous. In 2012, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison after he lured a man into the woods and held him at gunpoint before trying to hit him with a baseball bat and bury him alive. At the time, he was wanted on parole violations, but had disappeared. If you recall, at the time of our last report, Hamlet remained on the run and the actual victim of the murder had not been identified. Well, thankfully, that all changed this week when Monroe County Police released a couple of major updates in the case. For starters, Hamlet has successfully been located and arrested. He was caught at a hospital in Columbia, South Carolina after a member of the public recognized him and called police. On a sadder note, the victim of the fake bear attack has now also been named. He was identified as 34-year-old Knoxville resident Stephen Douglas Lloyd. Disturbingly, police say they believe Hamlet spent months befriending Stephen and gaining his trust, all the while he was intending to murder him. The crime is remarkably similar to the one he was first convicted of, though sadly, unlike that victim, Stephen didn't survive. In their announcement this week, Monroe County Police thanked the public for their help and shared this warning with other would-be fugitives. Quote, "The long arm of the law has a long and huge reach, and we will find you no matter where you hide. The deputies and investigators here know their county well. The TBI agents know their state well. The FBI and the Marshal Service know the country well and have reach across the world. So there's nowhere to hide."
Authorities in Orange County, California say that a man is facing a number of charges this week in connection with a truly heinous crime after he was accused of murdering a husband and wife he was in business with in order to escape a sizable debt. The whole thing started sometime on October 15th when police in the city of Brea were contacted by the worried family members of 37-year-old Quan Lung Wang. The loved ones stated that they had not heard from Quan Lung and his 37-year-old wife, Jing Li, in several days, which they said was extremely unusual. The family members also told authorities they'd had a strange interaction with the missing couple's business associate, 30-year-old Huang Ting Gong. They had reached out to Gong after they had seen a man matching his description on Quan Lun and Jing's surveillance system the previous day. However, Gong claimed that the man wasn't him. He also said that Quan Lung and Jing were supposed to meet him on October 12th in New York, but they had never shown up. The family told police they hadn't heard anything from the couple about a planned trip to New York, but they did know one thing. Gong owed them $80,000 at the time of their disappearance. Upon further investigation, police were able to piece together the horrifying truth. They now allege that Gong killed Quan Lun and Jing in order to get out of paying this large sum of money. Specifically, police say that on October 12th, Gong had Quan Lung meet him in the desert, where he fatally shot him. After that, he stuffed the 37-year-old's body into his own Tesla and drove back to his home in Brea. Once there, Gong allegedly attacked Jing with a hammer, demanding that she reveal the passcodes to her and her husband's phones. Once she was incapacitated, he drove her out to the desert as well, shot and killed her, and burned her remains. Gong also reportedly burned Wang's remains later on, and torched both of their vehicles in separate remote locations. As for the surveillance footage from October 14th, police say they believe this was when Gong went back to the couple's home to take whatever he could get his hands on. He allegedly made off with nearly $250,000 worth of watches, shoes, handbags, and clothing. Gong was arrested by investigators on November 5th after he got off a plane traveling from Seattle to Los Angeles. The 30-year-old is now facing a slew of charges, including 2 felony counts of murder, 1 felony count of kidnapping, 2 felony counts of arson of property, and 2 felony counts of first-degree burglary. He also faces 2 felony special circumstances enhancements for committing multiple murders, 1 felony special circumstances enhancement for committing murder during the commission of kidnapping, and 2 felony enhancements for discharging a firearm causing death. If convicted for the crimes, Gong faces life in prison or a possible death sentence.
Authorities in King County, Washington say that a 33-year-old woman is facing murder charges this week after she was accused of gruesomely killing her own father during a suspected mental health crisis, a situation that was apparently triggered by her response to election night results, as well as an argument over lighting. The whole thing began sometime around 8 p.m. on November 5th when police in Seattle's Rainier Valley neighborhood were called to the home of 33-year-old Corey Burke. Residents in the area stated that they heard loud noises coming from the property, including what they believed was someone smashing windows. When officers arrived at the home, they saw the shattered windows and heard what sounded like someone clapping inside. Their concerns were raised further when they made contact with Corey Burke and realized she was covered in what appeared to be blood. Burke reportedly seemed disoriented and gave strange answers when questioned by officers about what was going on. She told them that she had been clapping inside her house because she was happy. After learning that Burke's father, 67-year-old Timothy Burke, also lived at the address and suffered from health issues, officers eventually made their way inside. It wasn't long before they made an awful discovery. Timothy was lying dead on the floor and had obviously been the victim of a violent attack. During subsequent questioning, Corey Burke reportedly admitted that she had killed her father during the middle of an argument. She claimed that the incident had started because she was feeling, quote, overwhelmed about the results that were coming in for that night's presidential election. However, she said the specific reason for the altercation was an argument they were having over lights inside the house. She wanted them all off, and Timothy insisted on having lights on. Eventually, she said she snapped, grabbed a weapon, and began attacking him. That weapon turned out to be an ice climbing axe. Burke said initially she used the tool to strangle her dad, but that she needed to bite him as well because he was too strong. She explained that at some point after he went limp, she turned to beating him with both the sharp and blunt ends of the axe in the body and head to finish him off. Chillingly, she said that she sat next to Timothy as he took his last breaths and waited until he was dead. As if all of this wasn't horrifying enough, Burke allegedly told police that she felt like the killing was, quote, an act of liberation for her. She also claimed she wanted to help people, quote, change their attachments to their parents. Burke was taken to the hospital after the incident, where she was eventually discharged, though not before allegedly attacking a police officer there. She was placed under arrest and now remains in custody. At the time of this recording, Burke has been charged with first-degree murder, though given the numerous comments authorities have made about her mental state at the time of the incident, it remains to be seen where the case will go from here.
Representatives from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement say that a 64-year-old man is facing charges this week after he allegedly tried to pose as an undercover officer in order to avoid a background check. The whole thing apparently started recently when the FDLE was contacted by a real estate agency who said that they were trying to confirm an unusual claim that they had received. They said that a man, 64-year-old William Dennis Milstead, had applied to lease a residential property from them. However, he was refusing to complete the normal background check that's part of the process. The reason he was giving was that he was an FDLE agent working, quote, off-grid, and that undergoing the background check could blow his cover. That wasn't all, though. The real estate agency said that Milstead had submitted a document to them that he claimed he was from the FDLA, explaining all of this. After taking one look at the document, real FDLE officers could see that it was comically fake. The thing was riddled with spelling and grammatical errors, and Milstead had signed it as coming from the FDLA's, quote, off-grid command unit, which does not appear to be a real thing. The fraudulent letter went on to say that Milstead's employment with the FDLA began in October of 2006, and that he is, quote, 3 years shy of reaching his 20th year retirement. The most ridiculous part of the letter, though, was when Milstead allegedly wrote, quote, I can certify that William Dennis Milstead is a very reputable individual and would be a great compliment and an outstanding citizen to any community that he may reside in. This is funny not only because the letter itself was a con, but because the reason Milstead apparently wanted to avoid the background check in the first place was his 13 prior felony arrests. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he has also been charged with impersonating an officer twice before, once in 2002 and once in 2016. Milstead was booked on November 13th and is now facing new charges of falsely impersonating a police officer, making a false statement to obtain property, and using a two-way communication device to commit a felony.
I don't know what it is with schemes involving fake bear attacks recently, but strangely, we've got another one for you this week. And it might just be the dumbest thing we've come across yet. Representatives from the California Department of Insurance say that 4 people have been arrested and are facing fraud charges after they were accused of submitting multiple fraudulent insurance claims in relation to what they claimed were instances of animal-related damage to several high-end vehicles. The whole thing apparently began in late January of 2024, when one of the insurance companies in question received what they believed was a suspicious claim involving a 2010 Rolls-Royce Ghost. The claim alleged that a bear had gotten inside the vehicle while it was parked overnight in the community of Lake Arrowhead, and that significant damage had been done to the interior. When questioned about the situation, the 4 people responsible sent over a video as proof. That's when the insurance company decided to contact police. Here, take a look. Maybe you can spot why. You can probably tell right away what's going on, but just in case you can't, here's some help. That is not, in fact, a bear scratching up the interior of a luxury vehicle. It's a person in a bear costume, and not an especially convincing one at that. It gets even more obvious when you see the supposed scratch marks on the inside of the car. I don't know about you, but I've never heard of an animal that leaves behind exactly evenly spaced scratch marks that all happen to be identical and in a straight line. Despite how ridiculous this whole thing was, authorities still had to bring in the proper experts from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to officially call bullshit. They easily did this, and also found the bear suit the suspects allegedly used in a property right next to where all of this happened. Even so, the suspects successfully ripped off at least 2 other insurance companies before they were finally caught. According to reports, there were at least 2 other claims involving different Mercedes vehicles, with the men filing nearly $142,000 worth of total claims. The suspects have now been identified as 26-year-old Ruben Tamrazian, 39-year-old Ararat Chirkinian, 32-year-old Vahe Murad Kanyan, and 39-year-old Alfia Zuckerman. All 4 are now charged with insurance fraud and conspiracy. Unfortunately, though, we still don't have the answer to perhaps the most pressing question in this case. Which one of these suspects was actually in the bear costume.
Authorities in Wichita, Kansas say that 5 people are dead this week, including the suspect, after a man allegedly shot and killed 2 family members and 2 neighbors before turning his weapon on himself. The whole thing began at around 5:45 p.m. on November 10th, when police began receiving 911 calls about a possible shooting with multiple victims. Callers first directed police to a residence on the 1700 block of Santa Fe South, where they found the body of 67-year-old Anthony Stickney. Anthony was suffering from multiple gunshot wounds and sadly was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. Based on information police had received from other callers, they learned that Anthony's son, 42-year-old Joshua Stickney, was likely the last person at the residence before the shooting. He lived less than a mile away at a property on the 1900 block of South Laura Street. When officers went there to investigate, they could see what appeared to be someone lying on the ground unresponsive while peering through a window. They forced their way inside and found 3 people, all of whom had also been shot. One of the deceased was identified as Joshua Stickney, while the others were his friend, 66-year-old Donald Dodge, and his stepfather, 55-year-old Terry Meyer. Joshua's wounds were reportedly self-inflicted, and a gun was found next to his body. Initially, authorities thought this was the end of things. However, sadly, that turned out not to be the case. While canvassing the area looking for someone to temporarily take care of Joshua's pet, they found 39-year-old Alan Young dead inside of a third residence. He had injuries that were consistent with all of the other victims. At the time of this recording, very little additional information has been released about this case, even more than a week later. We don't know what prompted the deadly string of shootings, nor why the victims were specifically targeted. However, it's believed that Joshua was responsible for all of the shootings and that the same weapon was used in all of them. Currently, the situation is still under investigation.
One of the most high-profile cases in Indiana's recent history has finally resulted in a verdict this week after a man accused of the 2017 Delphi murders was convicted of multiple offenses related to the awful crime. If you've been following true crime-related news at all in the past few years, chances are you're at least somewhat familiar with this story. We've covered updates and information related to it several times on this channel, but just in case you don't know or have forgotten some of the details, here's a bit of a refresher. It all began on February 13th, 2017, when middle school students, 14-year-old Liberty Libby German and 13-year-old Abigail Abby Williams, went for a hike together along Indiana's Delphi historic trails. They were dropped off near the Manon High Bridge at around 1:30 that afternoon and were only supposed to be gone for a couple of hours. They had their phones with them and had made plans to meet Libby's dad at a predetermined pickup location that they were familiar with. However, the girls never showed up. A frantic search effort began almost immediately, but to everyone's horror, it came to an end just 18 hours later, when the bodies of both teens were found in the undergrowth on a remote trail on a piece of private property about half a mile from where they'd been dropped off. For the longest time, very few details had been released about the circumstances of Abby and Libby's murders. All police had revealed was that there was a lot of blood and that the girls were only partially dressed and missing some of their clothing. However, we now know that both of the teens died from multiple slash wounds to their throats. Of course, the most infamous pieces of evidence associated with the case were the set of pictures and a short video, which were taken on Libby's phone and posted to Snapchat around the time they went missing. They showed a man walking behind Abby and Libby on the bridge, and in the video, this same person could be heard saying, quote, "Guys, down the hill." The man in the footage came to be known as Bridge Guy and was immediately a major suspect in the case. Police released part of the video and the photos to the public, but it wouldn't be until more than 5.5 years later, in October of 2022, that this man was finally identified. He was a 50-year-old local drugstore worker named Richard Allen. At the time of our last update, when the news first broke of Allen's arrest, we didn't know a lot about how he had been connected to the crime. It's now been revealed that police actually spoke to him early on in the investigation. However, it wasn't until later, when a volunteer file clerk helping to organize tips related to the case flagged a document related to Allen's interview, that police took a closer look. At trial, prosecutors revealed what they found, including statements that Allen made admitting to being in the area where Abby and Libby disappeared during the time of their murders. Alan was also wearing clothing matching the outfit that bridge guy had on in the footage recorded on Libby's phone. Alan would also go on to make a number of confessions over the phone while being held in custody to both his wife and his mother. The biggest piece of evidence, though, was an unused bullet which had been reportedly found next to Abby and Libby's bodies. Authorities recovered a gun from Alan's house during a subsequent search, and they argued in court that there were distinct markings from that gun on the bullet that showed it had been cycled through the weapon. Prosecutors further argued that on the day of the crime, Alan was planning to kidnap and sexually assault Abby and Libby, but that after marching them down the hill at gunpoint, he became panicked when a vehicle drove by. That's when he changed plans and instead decided to kill the teens before fleeing the area. This week, Alan was found guilty of both murders, as well as 2 counts of murder while attempting to commit kidnapping. Alan's defense team have stated that they believe the case against him was weak, pointing to the lack of DNA and physical evidence in the case. They say they plan to appeal and instead have presented an alternative theory, that Libby and Abby were killed by a white nationalist cult who were conducting a ritual sacrifice. At the time of this recording, Richard Allen is scheduled to be sentenced on December 20th. He is currently facing up to 130 years in prison. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.